National School done out. Can you put it again? No? Sorry.
Hello, I'm Michael Sweeney. I'm 12 years old and I go to Murroe National School. We are doing a project on farming long ago. We collected information from our neighbours and relations. We are now going to do a video on farming, and there will be questions put to people who experience the farming. Thank you very much.
Everybody's going in good steam. Keep going.
This is Hughie McLean. He lives in Murroe, and he is going to help us with the project we are now doing. What age were you when you first started to work on the farm?
I would say about 14 years, maybe less than 14.
How long did you work each day?
About 10 hours, roughly.
What kind of farm was it?
Not a very good farm indeed.
Did you keep cattle, sheep or pigs?
Cattle and sheep.
What crops did you set?
We set potatoes and corn.
What machinery and tools did you have?
We had no machinery at that time. It was what they called farm implements for horses. A grubber, a plough and a dull plough and harvest. That's neither up to
How did you take the animals to the fairs?
We walked them to the fairs.
What price were the cattle and sheep in those days?
Well, the cattle were very cheap in them days. They were from maybe £10 down to about 12.5p now. half a crown in old money.
Who were the jobbers?
Well, the local jobber about here was Mickey McFadden, the late Mickey McFadden, and the son Mickey McFadden as well did a bit of it, and the Langens of Creasla, and Joe Kelly, Fulcara, and Mickey Jack, I don't know what's his other name, McFadden, I think. Gallagher. And a few more that didn't do a lot of dealing, but they were at it, you know.
What way did they settle the deal?
Well, whenever they were satisfied, and the person that was selling the animal was satisfied, paid them for them then, and that was the deal finished. And they expected what they called Lux penny in them days.
How much Lux penny would they get?
Oh, about 50p now, or a pound, maybe less, depend.
Were there any stalls to fairs?
There were surely stalls.
What sort of stuff did they sell at the stalls?
Well, they sold second-hand clothes, and I suppose new clothes, and articles like scissors and plates, you know, that kind of stuff.
Where would you get a dinner? Where would you get the dinners at the fairs?
Well, Fulcara in them days it was mostly Joe McAnulty's.
And how much were the dinners?
They would say 1 and 6.
Did they sell potatoes at the fairs?
Not so much in them times, I don't think.
Were there any fights?
Well, sometimes there might be.
Was there anybody who had a name like the fighting?
No, I don't think so. There were no champions among them at that.
Do you remember anybody being hired out in the wagon?
I do. I remember a brother of my own that's now in America being hired.
What time of the year did he go out?
November.
And was it 6 months he spent?
Yes, 6 months.
How much did he get for that?
I would say about £1 a month.
Did he have to work very hard?
Very hard.
And did he sleep in the house or?
Slept in the house, yes.
Did he get fed well?
It partly fed anyway.
And did he go back to school after he
No,
retired?
no, he didn't go back to school.
Did anyone who were hired go back to school after they were?
Well, not that I know of. I don't know if anyone that went back to school.
Did they do any ploughing or that when they were hired?
They had all classes of work.
How many horses did a Lagan farmer have?
They would have 3 or 4 maybe.
And a local person?
A local person here would have 1 horse.
And were horses expensive to keep?
They were fairly expensive to keep all right.
And what were they fed?
Fed with straw and oats and potatoes.
How much did the blacksmith charge for shoes?
5 shillings in old money, that would be 25p for a set.
And the sheep, cattle, and the pigs, what were they fed?
The cattle were fed on turnips and straw. And the sheep weren't fed in them days, only on grass that they got through the fields.
When was the corn and the potatoes not all dug?
They would be finished up about Halloween.
And the harvest day, was there any games or anything like that the men would play when the harvest was almost cut?
No, not that I ever heard of.
And did you ever make straw ropes?
Yes, I did.
Tell us about how they were made.
Well, they were made with straw and somebody twisting what they called a trahug or a carhugan in Gaelic.
And were they difficult to make?
They were pretty hard to make. It was a skill on its own.
Was there anybody in the area that made them better than anybody else?
Well, some maybe fancied themselves better, making them than others.
Were they as good as the ropes today?
Well, you don't see anybody making them kind of straw ropes, but it's very hard to get any other kind of ropes at the present day, apart from nylon ropes.
And was there any harm done to the haystacks or corn stacks by rats?
Yes, there were very often.
What kind of damage did they do?
Well, they had to wear the grain.
And was that a big problem for the farmers?
Of course a problem, surely.
And was there any cats running the farmers?
The average farmer kept a couple of cats every morning.
And what would happen if the harvest failed?
Well, if the weather was anything like what it does now, it would fail all right, but they nearly always got it saved.
And were the potatoes the main crop?
Yes, potatoes were the main crop.
What would happen if the farmer came across a corncrake's nest? What would he do with it?
Well, I don't think he would interfere with it.
How did they prepare the ground for the harvest?
They ploughed the land first, and then they harrowed and drove the corn. Yes.
Were the horses very tired?
But they would be tired enough indeed.
And how many days cutting and paring the bog did the farmer do?
About 2.
And
Well, maybe more for cutting. 2 days for paring and 2 or 3 days for cutting.
did he fit the turf like they do today?
No, there's a lot of machine turf being cut now, but there were no machine turf cut in them days. It was all with the slan,
What's that, slan?
a turf spade.
Was it very hard work?
It was fairly hard work all.
Was there any farmers around here with a mehel?
Yes, there were surely.
What is the mehel?
A hell, I would say, to be 5 men going to the bog together. 1 for paring the bog and 2 for cutting, and 2 for throwing out the turf. Maybe 7 men, but that's what was considered a mahal anyway.
And was it harder cutting the turf, or was it harder to drive them with the crane?
Well, they were neither. The job was easy, indeed.
And would the neighbours help, or did the
Sometimes.
did the hired men have to pay it, or would they just
No, they just
swap it a day?
swapped them.
What kind of work did the farmer do in the winter?
He didn't do very much in the winter apart from feeding the cattle and looking after the horse.
Was there any ditches to be meant, or?
Well, there were sometimes, but he didn't do a big lot of that kind of work in the winter time.
How did he set this? Did he keep seed potatoes for the harvest the following year?
Yes, he did, sure.
And what would the average farmer what kind of will he do mixed work in the day, or just do set them one time?
Well, I see he set the potatoes and then so.
Did what sort of stuff did he do at night? Did he go around to?
He went to the neighbour house sometimes to have a chat with the neighbour.
Was there a lot
And maybe play cards or something to pass the time. There were no television in them days.
Was there a lot of stories being spun?
There were a lot of ghost stories and all them kind of stories.
Do you remember any of them?
Well, saying it.
Did they speak a lot about ghosts?
They did indeed, and believed a lot in ghosts.
Did they scare themselves more by talking about
They
it?
did. They scared the younger people, which was a bad job, I think.
And thank you very much. That's about it now.
Very good, Nick.
Thank you. Right.
Hello, my name is Nicola Perry and I'm 10 years old. I go to Murroe National School and I'm in 4th class. We are doing a project on farming long ago, and I would like to introduce my grandfather here. His name is Manny Ferry and he's 77 years old and he lives in Murroe. What age were you when you first started to work on the farm?
9 or 10 years, I would say.
How long did you work each day?
There's some days were longer than the others, maybe 10 or 11 hours.
What kind of farm was it, big or small?
Oh, just small farm.
Did you keep cattle, sheep and pigs?
Keep cattle and sheep, a couple of pigs too.
What crops did you set?
The potatoes and the oats, turnips.
What machinery or tools did you have?
Ordinary machinery for the horses, the plough and grubber and through ploughs.
How many days cutting and paring in the balls did you do?
I suppose we'd have maybe about 6 or 7 men for a day cutting it. And the ball paired before.
Were you switching and turning the turn?
A lot depended on the weather, you know. Like, it was spent 2 days turning and then.
And if it was good weather, how long would it take?
You'd have to turn them first, and then maybe 40 after that you would fit them up. And if the weather was good, then you could fit them up in heaps. And if the weather was bad, it would take a lot longer.
How many men or boys were working in the ball? In the ball that time?
Everyone who cattled in went to the bog that time, you know, we swapped days and
What food did you eat when you came home?
big one.
What food did you eat when you came home for dinner?
Oh, you would have dinner then, and maybe they would have a hen kilt or something.
Did you have creams grinding the stuff? Did you have cranes dragging the turf?
Mostly with the crane, there was mostly bags that time too.
Did
Didn't
you
roll
have-
up cranes.
Did you have bottles of water and milk in the bog, watches?
Yes, you took the water to the bog, the milk. You put it into the bog there to keep it fresh. The sun wouldn't get at it.
Do you remember anyone who was being hired out?
Oh, they did it at that time. There was plenty. They went away to Letterkenny, 12th of November to get hired out.
Do you remember any of their names?
Oh, there was plenty of the neighbours. Even when I left school myself, I was hired out and
What kind of work did you do?
did all classes of work. It was cook, and butler. When it was there, there was no woman in the house. Milked cows and went to the bog and made pikes, hens, and made bread, milk, churned milk, made butter.
How long a term did you do? What times of the year did you go out?
From November to May, 6 months, and from May to November, another 6 months.
How much did you get each month?
Well, the first 18 months I was hired, I got £1 a month for 18 months.
Did you go back to school after being hired out?
No, didn't go back to school.
Did you have any horses in the farm?
We had, yes.
How many?
We had 2 horses.
2 horses.
Yeah.
Were horses expensive to feed?
And they were fairly expensive, but stuff was cheap that time, you know. You grew the stuff that fed them. Didn't have to buy anything.
What did they feed them? What did you feed the horses?
Oh well, the oats were thrashed and they ate the straw then, and they get corn then.
Did they use horses for anything else, only ploughing?
Oh, but carting home the turf and doing all other jobs like that.
Was there any blacksmiths that time?
There was indeed a lot more than there is now anyhow. There was 3 blacksmiths in Dunfanny at that time.
How much would you pay for a pair of shoes?
Well, it was 5 shillings of the old money, and 25 pence now. New set of shoes. And 2 shillings for what the old ones removed and put them on again.
Did you walk cattle to the fairs?
We didn't do it, yeah.
What price were cattle and sheep in those days?
They were very cheap at that time, in 1933 on.
Who were the jobbers?
And at the fairs you got them coming from Letterkenny and Milford and round there and places. Mostly.
How did they settle the deal? How did they settle the deal for the cows and the sheep and that?
How did they?
How did they deal the money for the sheep and the cows and that?
Oh, the man was selling, he asked so much, and the man was going to buy then. He was offered them so much less. So then there was someone else would divide what was between them. So they eventually kept doing that. They made a bargain then.
Did you get dinner at the fair days?
No, you got bacon and eggs and tea was mostly at
Where
that
would
time.
you get them?
That was just always a few places that made teas and dinners.
How much was the fee?
About 1 and 3 for Karen out there and they started up. Big plate of bacon, 2 eggs and all bread and butter you could eat.
Would they sell the potatoes at the fair?
Huh?
Would they sell the potatoes at the fair?
No, they wouldn't sell any potatoes at the fairs, no.
Were there any fights at the fairs? Was there any fights at the fairs?
No, I don't know.
When did they cut the corn?
In September, they started to cut the corn.
Did they dig the potatoes at the same time?
No, a month later in October, we'd dig the potatoes, maybe sometimes at the end of November when we get them finished, depending on the weather.
Was there any harvest days? Harvest days?
No, there's no harvest. It's Thanksgiving during that time.
Why was it so important to save the harvest? Why was it so important to save the harvest?
Oh, well, that's what the people depends on to feed the cattle and horses for the winter. If they didn't get the harvest saved, and the grain to make meal, to make bread and porridge and everything.
What happened when the harvest failed?
Well, the weather was better, I think, at that time. It very seldom it failed, you know, it was always got some time or other.
How did they prepare the ground for the potatoes?
First it was ploughed with the horses, and then it was maybe second ploughed then and harrowed, made fine then.
Where would they sell the potatoes?
April potatoes would be set, yes.
What work did the farmer do in winter?
When they didn't do so much work in the winter time, there would be, they'd get this corn trashed, they'd take it to the mill, and maybe you get 2 or 3 neighbours, one helped the other, you know, four, 5 carts, so they'd cart the build the corn on carts and take it to the mill to get it trashed, take the grain off.
When the potatoes were finished and the new potatoes weren't made, what did they do?
Well, they would look the porridge and that they made from the open meal, that came from the corn, was ground down in that mill down there, called Cragan, and they made meal of it.
Thank you.
Maddie.
Donegal.
Paul.
From Murroe. I go to Murroe school. I'm 9 years old, and this is Jim LaFerry. He comes from Innisbroughen Island, and he's helping us do a project on Innisbrohen Island on farming years ago. What age were you when you first started working on the farm?
Yeah, about 12 years ago.
How long would you work each day?
Well, there was no steady hours, you know.
Was it a big loss if you lost a cow?
It was indeed too much, because sometimes you had only the one cow, you know. So
What?
if you lost it, you
What?
mightn't have the price of another one, you know.
What animals did they keep on the farm?
Well, sheep mostly, and sometimes later on in the years I kept a lot of cattle too, when I got a bit of money, you know.
What crops did you set?
Well, on our island it was mostly rye. Corn I always set, but the half of the island was of sandy soil, you know. And it was great for rye and potatoes and turnips.
What was the rye for?
Great for feeding cattle and for making potting, you know. You don't know anything about it, but it was good for that. Yeah.
How is it different in Inishbofin Island to farming on the mainland, Jamila? How is the island different?
What I heard, that there wasn't much difference between the two, you know. Mostly the same.
But
The same work.
The same methods.
With the horses, and it was all horses we had on the island. Every house had a horse because the ground there is very heavy, you know.
Yes.
Very heavy soil. Half the island anyway. So.
And for instance, living on an island, Jamila, how would you get the horses into the island?
Well, on our island, when the spring tide was there, you walked them across, and sometimes we swam them across.
Do people swim with the horses?
Yes, and I've seen a couple of times where a horse was sold for 2 years and still come back to the island after 2 years.
The horse would swim back in?
You come back after 2 years, sold for 2 years, you come back to the island again.
How many horses would you keep?
Oh, one for every household.
When would you stick the potatoes?
It wouldn't matter. Some of them would leave them later, you know. It was a bit late. September, October, you know, around about that time.
Did you ever sell any potatoes?
Oh, many's the time I sold potatoes because I had plenty of them, you know. They weren't much got for them at that time, you know. It's so much a ton. It wasn't much anyway, about £6 a ton, I think, was the last ones I sold. That's a long time ago.
How many days would it take you to cut and pare the bogs?
Well, that was the worst on us because there were no bog on the island. We'd have to go to the mainland and walk for 3 miles to the bog and walk 3 miles back in the evening and go back home. And maybe sometimes I did it myself often, go fishing after you come back in the evening to haul lobster pots, and then it would be about 12 o'clock when you got back from that. And then get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and haul your lobster pots again before you went back to the mainland to go to the bog again.
Where would the Inishbofin people have the bogs, Jamila?
Up on the Murroe mountain,
Right.
about 3 to 4 miles,
Walk?
at least walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you get it home? Donkeys or horses?
Oh, well, in my time there were first lorries come out and we'd bring it to Murroe that time and take it across to the boats, open boats. There were no engines that time. Just sailing boats and bring it all across, which was some work.
Would neighbours help you?
Everybody, thank God, helped one another. But the most of the time there were a lot of men on our island always.
Did they enjoy the bog?
It's a thing I never enjoyed in my life, you know, because they were too much work. And bringing home the turf to our island, if there was a film made, I don't know what you would call it, because between men and women, and I've seen that myself, once you beach the boat on the island, 3 at least would jump out to the waist in the water. And there'll be 2 filling the creels in the boat and carrying that up the beach, stony beach.
What is a creel?
That's the thing that's made by, what do you call the rods again? Sally rods.
How did you make the rope?
Well, we had no cord to make, depends on what you mean.
Did you make straw ropes?
No, we never ever had to make straw ropes, because when you're fishing there's too much ropes lying about, you know. And we had nets then to put on the stacks instead of thatch, you know. It was handy.
When did you cut the corn?
At the end of August, September, you know, depending. When it was ready to cut, we cut it, you know.
Was the big loss if you had lost the crop? the crop failed?
No, it never did in my lifetime. It was very early and very dry in with us, always. I never seen any crop loss.
Do you know anybody who was hired out?
I do indeed. I went out there, but I only stayed a week, you know. I went out to Milford one time. I got fed up after a week. So I come home.
Tell us about that.
How
Where
mu-
did you get hired? Jim?
I was hired in Milford.
But where did you go to be hired? Was it Murroe or?
In Milford.
Huh?
In Milford.
And how did you go to Murroe?
Bus.
You took the bus there?
Yeah. So I stayed there for a week. I wrote home to my mother to meet me on the next fair day, so that finished me.
And what
I went to Scotland after that.
age were you?
14.
Tell us about generally, because that's something that isn't so much known now about people who were hired and the type of work they had to do and the actual procedure of being hired. Like somebody come up to you in the street and say, what did they say to you? And could you tell
Or
us?
they would ask your mother or whoever was with you at the time if you were young, too young to go on your own, you know, how much she was looking for you. The boy for the 6 months. I know it was £24 I was bought for anyway.
Yeah.
So
What age were you, Jim?
about 12 to 14. I was 14. Yes.
Could you tell us just about that day, what your recollections of it? And
I don't
how you
really
felt?
remember much about it, only the following morning I remember that well, because I had to get up at 5 and go out and clean out under the horses first and clean out all the byres and do everything before you got anything to eat at all. So.
How long did you have to stay hired out?
Oh yeah, if you hired out for 6 months or whatever time, you know. But I didn't stay, I only stayed a week and that was long enough because the work was too heavy for me. You know.
Where would you sleep?
Well, there was a place up on top called the attic, you know. The sleeping quarters was all right, but I didn't like it one bit.
Did they go back to school after being hired out?
No, I never did, no. No. I stayed home for a couple of years. I went fishing after I come back from there. And then a few years after that I went away to Scotland.
Were the horses expensive to feed?
They weren't too bad because you had mostly had all your own stuff, you know. You didn't have to buy anything for them.
What did you feed them?
Oh, corn or turnips, the same as anywhere else, you know. Straw.
How many blacksmiths were around? Were there any blacksmiths?
Well, we always took them out to Archbag and you know, over in Gordork. There's 2 blacksmiths. We always come out to the but St. Patrick's Day, out the Flan, the whole lot. That would be a great day for us. Go back in the middle of the night, galloping. Half stupid drunk, you know. That's the way it was.
How much are the horses?
Must what?
How much was it horses?
Well, I couldn't, to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you how much it cost.
Did you just keep hens?
Oh yes, we did always, yeah.
Did you ever kill any of them for food?
Oh, you did, sure. Especially at Christmas and any day like that, you know.
What kind of, what was there any different of farming in Scotland than there is here?
I didn't do any farming in Scotland. It was construction. Well, I didn't do one season just with the harvest, that's all.
Was it the same as here?
There wasn't much difference, but heavier stuff there, you know. Heavy work also carrying bags upstairs.
On the fair days, did you walk the cattle to the fairs?
Well, while we took them out always a couple of days beforehand, either by swimming them across, you know, then walk from Murroe to Tulcara to the fair. So,
What price were the cattle and sheep in those days?
well, I remember the first cow I bought after calving. £24 I paid for it.
What to the sheep?
The sheep. I remember the first 2 lambs my mother bought for me. She bought them and got Ark fare for 12 shillings, 6 shillings each.
Who were the jobbers?
They were from all over, you know, mostly out the country, from Letterkenny, Murroe area. There's a few local ones too.
What was it, a jobber?
Well, sometimes they went in, jobbers went into our island to try and buy stuff in, and sometimes they did buy stuff in, you know. Then we'd take them out to them.
How would you settle a deal?
Oh, you would argue away. Some people I would never would argue. I would either sell or I wouldn't sell at all. But then some people would argue for an hour, maybe 2 hours, trying to hatch a deal.
Were there stalls?
There were plenty of stalls, yeah. Selling clothes, and mostly second hand, you know, boots, shoes, anything like that. Yeah.
Were there any fights?
Oh, well, there were, well, sometimes there'd be a fallout, surely. With us, before we went home, you know, because we had one too many always.
Where did you get the dinner?
Well, mostly Galahs now. When I started coming there, Galahs, and then the Shamrock started up.
Much of the dinners?
I couldn't tell you though, it wasn't dear anyway. So it wasn't. I think it was, if you went in for a cup of tea and bread, it was 18 pence. All money. Something like that.
Did anybody else sell potatoes at the stalls?
Oh, there were no, I never seen potatoes sold at the stores. No. There were nothing like that sold.
Did they sell corn
No,
and stuff like that?
no. I never seen it anyway.
What is a sheaf?
Sheep was, that was a sheep of corn. That's the way you tied it up, you know, when you were cutting it.
What is a stook?
Well, the stook was you made them up, you made up the sheaves then with by 6 to 12, depending on how you wanted it. Some people made them up by 8 and tied the top of them, you know, so that the one wouldn't blow them over.
Was a rat a problem?
Never with us, there was never a rat on the island. Plenty of mice right enough, and they were just as bad. Yeah, they were bad.
What kind of potatoes did they sell?
Well, pints for your own use. You know, we sold a lot of banners, you know, for the cattle and horses.
How did they prepare the ground?
Just by plowing and harrowing and then making it up for whatever use you were going to make of it. Yeah. But it was different with us, you know, on an island. It's completely different. When you're fishing and trying to farm, the last years I was at it, I had about 12 head of cattle and about 80 sheep. And I would have to get up in the morning and milk 2 cows. The calves with them, but they had too much milk. And the evening then I would go fishing, salmon fishing. I'd milk them again before I would go. When I would come back from fishing at 5 o'clock in the morning, I would milk them again.
What
So-
work do the farmers do in the winter?
Not much. We were at the fishing in the winter time, fishing for herring, you know. So when we weren't doing that, you'd go to, a gang would go into a house and start telling stories, or used to have lot of dances, you know, that time on the island.
What happened if the potatoes run out?
Well, thank God they never ran out short. We never ran short anyway. So, at the finish up, I got fed up with the cattle, you know. But I used to give milk to every house, and I used to milk them up on top of the island where I'd be coming down then. Any house with no milk, I would go in and leave milk there. And at the finish up, one evening I come into the house and I sat down and I said to myself, who are you doing this for? Or what is it all for? So a month after, I hadn't a bit left in the house. Because no woman would tell me, Jimmy, I'll milk your cows tonight or I'll milk them tomorrow night. They could use the milk already. So I sold out.
Did you sell all the animals?
I did. I sold out that time. But I started back again with the sheep.
Did you sell any of the land?
Oh no, no. No, I wouldn't sell any of the land. No.
Thank you.
So am I.
Gallagher. I'm aged 11. I'm at Murroe National School and I'm in 5th class. And I would like to introduce Michael Ferry. He was used to be living in Derryville and Dunlewy, and now he's living in Derryville, and he's Derryville, and he wanted to and he offered to help us with the project on the farming. What age were you when you started the farming?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, Anne-Marie, that as you said, I did come from Dunlewy. Dunlewy is a very small farming area. It is a very rural community. In my day, it was a community of about 60 families. That time, they were all small farmers because there was no great land in Dunlewy. And just in answer to your question, I started farming, or maybe I was introduced to farming at a relatively young age. Even introduced to farming during the time I would be going to school, work, doing little bits of farm work after school. And then after leaving school, continue to do farm work in addition to other work.
Did you have sheep and cattle and pigs?
Yes, our farm was small, no more than 7 acres. There were cattle, sheep, 2 pigs. For the most year there were 2 pigs. There was also chickens, ducks, and sometimes a goose or 2.
What crops did you set?
Well, the crops, that time farmland was recycled. The crops were corn, potatoes, grass, turnips, sweaties, cabbage. They were the main crops. Now, what would happen one year when you had potatoes in land, had to be turned over to put corn in it the following year, and then maybe the following year, then again that would be turned over again, ploughed if you will, and the grass seed put in it. So the land was always kept recycled in sections like that. There was always a third of it being turned over, and eventually went into leaf ground, back into corn, back into potatoes, and that was the basic setup of the farmland.
What machineries or tools did you use?
Well, in those days, machinery was a very rare thing. In fact, in my young days in Dunlewy, there were no tractors at all in Dunlewy. In my very young years, I can recall perhaps a horse in every house in Dunlewy, but then they dwindled down to just to 2 or 3 horses. I suppose my father in our house in Dunlewy was probably the last person to have a horse in Dunlewy. So, in answer to your question again, there was no machinery. Now, there was farm implements that were suitable for doing horse work or for doing manual work, as the case may be. And that ranged in, first of all, there was a regular cart on a farm. There would be a plough, a grubber, also a plough for ploughing the land and a plough for making drills. Some farmers also made wooden ploughs to help make the drills on the land. There would be a harrow and also some other implements like that. I'm trying to recall of another thing, but I can't remember the name of it. Grubber, yeah, that's the one, yes.
How many horses did you have?
We only had one horse because that was enough to, you could never afford to have more than 2 horses on a small farm.
Were they expensive to have?
Well, not expensive to keep. Once you purchased a horse, then they was relatively inexpensive to keep them because people grew their own fodder, as it were, on their land, and then that kept feeding the horse, or the horses, in our case, a horse.
What did you feed them on?
Well, a horse every morning would be fed corn, sometimes hay. The most appropriate feeding for a horse would be a shave. Now that was the grain that was still attached to the straw, and it was a very good feeding for a horse. Sometimes too, depending on the condition of the horse, you may have to give them certain minerals.
What was a horse used for anything else?
For more than farm work?
Yeah.
Yes, a horse was used for many things. It was used first of all to do the ploughing in the springtime of the year. Also the harrowing, that was breaking the ground into fine soil. Then it was used again to open, the horse was used again to open the drills. Later on in the year it was used to grub the land and what they call mould the potatoes, as the case may be. It was also used for carting. Carting would mean you'd maybe go to the bog and take home the turf and many other projects like that.
Blacksmiths and shoes, how much did they cost?
Well, in Dunlewy there were no blacksmiths. I suppose the nearest blacksmith to Dunlewy was Bunbeg. That would be something like 9 miles away. So my father was a local handyman, and he knew how to shoe horses. So what would be done in most cases, that the foot of the horse would be measured, and then you went to the blacksmith and got the shoes and took them home, and then the shoe would be reheated in a fire and reshaped to meet the little adjustments for the particular horse that you put in the shoe on. Now, as far as the cost would be concerned, I couldn't tell you that. I know it was very inexpensive anyhow. Because normally when you went to the blacksmith, you got other things on the same day. You might get chisel sharpened. When I say chisel, they were like iron chisel that was used for quarrying. And there'd be other things as well. You might have to get extra toes on the grubber and make new iron toes, or you may have to get a piece added to the cooter of the plough. So when the bill was all paid, it was paid in one lump sum, and I couldn't tell you the price of the shoes.
Now the harvest, when did you cut the corn and dig the potatoes?
Well, the corn was cut usually in September, and the potatoes were dug normally in October. If it was a very bad year, you might be a little bit later with both of them. I did see potatoes dug in the first week of November. But they were the basic months for cutting corn and digging potatoes.
Rats, how did they destroy the corn?
Well, that time people had more corn that is planted than is normally planted today. So there was corn put into the barn, and also there were stacks made in the fields. Now the stacks that were made in the field were subject to have rats in them, because they would come from the ditches and they would set up their own little nest in the corn stacks, and there they would stay. They would raise their young there, and they would stay until perhaps the corn was being put back into the barn again, or maybe being trashed. The destruction, depending on the number of rats in the stack, but they could be very destructive in that they destroyed the grain. So therefore, it would be no good for replanting again.
What happened if the harvest of crops in a field?
Well, for the most part, in the years that I done farming, in the early years that I done farming, crop failure was relatively rare. You may have like a poorer crop one year than another year, but for the most part, the crops are always fit to be saved. So we never experienced any year where there was where there be no crop. It is true that because of a bad year, that your stock or your supply would be low. For example, you may have less potatoes to carry it through the winter, and also to save enough for seed potatoes for the following year. The same thing would apply to corn. Now sometimes the corn that would be trash would be taken to a mill and made into oatmeal, and the oatmeal was brought back home and made into well, porridge in some cases, and in those days they used to bake oaten bread. So some years the supply was less than others, but never a failure in the years that I remember farming.
How many bags did you use to set the crop?
Well, it depends on the amount of crop that you would set. There'd be so many bags to the acre. Normally for an acre of corn, the run would be about 20 stone to the acre. That would be equivalent to 2.5 bags. Now, 100 weight today is 100 pound, 100 weight that time was 112 pound. I think that's what it was anyhow. So it depends on what you planted, but that was basically what it took to plant an acre of corn. Now, potatoes also, depending on the amount of potatoes you planted, potatoes were spaced approximately a foot apart from the drills, and then depending on the number of drills you had and the acreage that they would be on. So that would be the quantities it would take to set that amount.
Was potatoes important?
Potatoes were very important. First of all, potatoes were a source of food for most farmers in those days. Food in the sense that you would get your family meal from potatoes. The principal meal was dinner, and the potatoes were always used for dinner. Then at that particular time there'd be extra potatoes boiled, and those potatoes were used to feed the chickens. They were also used to feed the dog. They were also used to mush up and feed make a drink for cows, and they were very, very useful like that.
Right, the bog, how many days would you cut and turn the thorp?
Well, again, that would depend very much on the weather and the number of people that you would have. In those days, bog work was done by a team of people. The Gaelic name for the team was Mahal. And what you would do in the bog first is that the owner of the bog would go to the bog and pare the banks. Now, it would normally take at least 2 days for that, depending on the condition of the bog and the banks. So to pare the banks means taking off a certain width of sod, maybe up to 18 inches, depending on how many turf you're taking off. And then that sod was removed down to the floor of the bank, and you left X number of yards of banks for cutting. Then your neighbours would come on a particular day, usually up to 8 people. And that meant that would be 4 turf spades, maybe 3 or 4 turf spades going. And normally the average household that time would cut 4 dark of turf. Now a dark of turf is equivalent to what a man cutting turf and his mate putting out turf would cut in a day. So that's what a dark. So 4 dark of turf.
How would you take it home?
Well, the turf then was dried. Again, you depended a lot on the weather. Some years it was good, some years it was bad. I know in some places the turn turf, it wasn't normally done in Dunlewy. The turf would be, maybe let it get relatively hard, and then they were footed, as they called it. Now there are different styles of footing. It was a matter of putting them together in 6 or 8 turf, and some people then they made what they call wonder footing, which wasn't a good principle of saving turf. After that, there were put into clumps called, or refooted as they call them, into larger clumps. And then when they were considered dry enough for gathering, there would be also a team. Another mahal would come on a particular day with cradles and bags and boxes and planks and ladders and all of that. And they would gather all the turf into a huge stack in the bog. And then that stack was neatly built into a point In fact, the name of the last sod they used to put on the top of the turf stack was known in Gaelic as the Fod Panaga. I don't know what it means. And then that would be left there until a suitable time for carting the turf would be. Our turf was about 1.5 miles from the house, and the turf then would be carted. You might have a neighbour who would help you, so you would take the horse and cart roughly 5 loads a day until you get all the turf home.
What would you eat in the bog?
In the bog?
Yeah.
Well, the bog at that time was a big project when it came to food, because on the night before the Mehal went to the bog to cut turf, everything was prepared in the house. There would be potatoes peeled, there'd be all kinds of food ready, and when the people were going to cut the turf, they would come to the house in the morning time relatively early, and there they would have their breakfast. Breakfast was a hearty breakfast. That time was supposed to at least 2 eggs, some bacon, toast and butter, and they would try and be in the bog by 8 o'clock in the morning. Then there would be the horse would be yoked in the cart. All of the food would be put in the cart and taken to the bog, and there'd be a huge fire lit in the bog. There'd be a 3-legged pot brought down, put on the fire, and then they would boil the potatoes there. And it was almost like a feast when it came to eating in the bog those days. So it was also a day perhaps you got a little bit extra, more than you normally get at home, because that day they would have a pot of jam, and they'd have maybe a bit of cake and some extra biscuits and things like that, or special buns.
Would you stick the milk in the water and that in the...
Yes, that was done too, because if there was good weather in the summertime in the bog, it didn't apply so much when you're cutting the turf, but especially when you were gathering the turf. The milk would be preserved, keep it from turning sour by putting it in the bog, or putting it in a little running stream of water where it was kept at a certain low temperature.
Winter time, what did the farmers do in the winter?
Well, I could only relate to my case, or in our case at home. My father was as I mentioned earlier, he was a local handyman, mainly a stonemason. So I learned the ins and outs of little bits of handyman work. So in my early years at home, we had a little workshop, so we used to do things. Either make doors, windows, maybe go and repair somebody's house, maybe put a room in addition to the room or something like that in the winter. So that was our basic work in the winter time.
What would happen to the potatoes, if they fail, 1 year, one of the years?
Well, what might happen there is that you might be lucky enough that your crop, even though it was a poor crop, you may have enough to do you. But if you didn't, somebody else in the neighbourhood would, and there'd be an exchange of, rather than maybe buying potatoes, there was often an exchange. If you were short of potatoes, some other neighbour might give it to you in exchange for corn that you had. So there'd be a swap of one against the other one. So
The women's work, every house had a bag of flour. What would they do with empty bags?
well, flour was a very necessary food commodity, as you can appreciate that. Now, in those years, there were the supply of flour came in white linen bags for the most part, and there were two that came into our neighbourhood. One was the Milford flour mills, I think, and the other one was, I think there was bags called the Pride of the West, or the Pride of Erin, I think, from Ballasadair in County Sligo. Now, those bags had a very fine linen in them, and there would be, when the flour was empty, they would be kept until they had a certain number, maybe 10 or 12 bags. And then they would be washed. They were normally boiled in hot water and washed. The purpose of that was to take the print of the bag, because it would have the label of the company on it. And it used to be either green and red, and then they would wash those with washing soda and other powders until they got them clean, until the linen became clean. And then they would take a needle, if they didn't have a sewing machine, and sew 4 bags together, and they were used then for sheets or pillowcases, as the case may be.
Fair days. Would you walk the cattle to the fairs?
Yes, if you were taking cows and sheep to the fair. It was the only way to get them to the fair was to walk them to the fair in those days. Now, in this rural part of Donegal, there were fairs in different localities on different dates. Those dates were known to the farmers, and they would know when to bring the cattle to the fair. For example, the Palcara Fair was always the last Thursday of the month. There was a fair called Jack's Fair, which is a place called Minelec, that was the 16th of the month. The fair in Dunlow was on the 4th of the month. The Derry Beg Fair was on the 10th of the month. So on like that, they were the local fairs that you would service the Dunlewy area. So the cattle and sheep would be walked to the fair, yes.
What price would the cattle and sheep be?
Well, there were varied prices. I can't really remember the price of cattle, but I do remember sheep being 16 shillings a pound. Sorry, 16 shillings a sheep, and not a pound. That would be a relatively high price.
Who were the jobbers?
Well, there were a number of jobbers that used to come into Dunlewy. There were a few regular jobbers, in addition to jobbers that would come down from the north of Ireland. But I remember the regular jobbers were, there was one from this very local area here called Mickey McFadden, Mickey Hanson. There was then a gentleman from Creesla, his name was Joe Langan, and his sons, there was Hughie and John Langan. There was also a jobber from, I think it's over the Doohery direction, his name was Paddy Joe Gill. So these were some of the local jobbers that come into the area.
Who would they settle a deal?
Well, of course, if a jobber knew you had anything to sell, he would come to your house. He might come anyhow and inspect to see if he could get a bargain. If a farmer wanted to sell an animal to the jobber, the farmer would put a price on it, or maybe the jobber would offer a price, as the case may be. Usually one or the other anyhow, and then they didn't initially agree on the price. If it was for example, a sheep, there'd be a few shillings in the difference. If it was a cow, there might be a pound or two in the difference. So they would haggle over that for the longest time until eventually they came to some agreement. Now, the way that they dealt or finished the deal, as it were, is that they would ask the farmer to hold out the hand, and then they would slap the hand and say, "I'll offer you so much." Then that may not be agreed on, and they would up the price maybe another shilling or two, or down as the case may be. So eventually it was settled with a deal, and then there was a thing called Lux money, or that meant you give a few shillings back to the dealer, or if you're buying from the dealer, you would give a few shillings back to the farmer. Or if it was, in the case of a cow, maybe up, I don't know, maybe up to 7 or 8 shillings, I don't know much.
On the fair's day, where would you get the dinner? How much was it?
Well, Palcara was always a good place to eat for dinner, and so were the other places, because they were geared to suit the rural farmer at that particular time. Relative to Palcara, as the place you might know best, Palcara had several eating houses in it. There was a house there that we used to eat in regularly. It was a place called Cassie Roties. And Cassie always prepared a good meal, and it wasn't very expensive.
What would you sell at the fairs?
Well, what was sold at the fairs from our community, and certainly from our house, would be probably 2 or 3 things. Horses. Once you bought a horse, and normally it stayed with you until it died, because if you found it to be a good working horse, that's the horse you kept. Cattle, certainly, if you had a young calf, and there wasn't that many cows in the average farm in Dunlewy, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 as the case may be, but if you had a young calf to sell, or maybe 2, you would walk them to Palcara. There might also be an older sheep that's if you were taking them to Palcara to sell, or to any other of the other fairs. You might also have some young lambs. Normally, if there was pigs brought to the fair, they'd be brought in the cart, because they're impossible to drive on the road. So you might do the same with a few sheep. You might bring a few sheep in the cart, or a few lambs as well. So that's what was normally brought to the fair. And you would try and not bring those back with you if it's at all possible. You would try and sell them. Because in most cases that was needed money in a farmhouse, because there'll be other things needed to buy. There might be foodstuffs needed to buy. If it's a case of a farmer, he may have to buy some part for his farm implement. It might be what is known as a sock for a plough or a cooter, or he may have to buy something for the cart. He may have to buy timber to fix the cart, as the case may be. And that money was needed.
Was there stalls?
Yes, there were stalls nearly in every town where there was a fair, because those people followed the people around. So there were different kinds of stalls. Usually there were stalls, old lorries that would come in and they would put a little canvas on the top, and one person would be selling plates and junks and combs, another person might be selling tools, saws, hammers and the like of that. Somebody else might be selling clothes, second-hand clothes, as somebody said earlier. They were also a useful service to the community.
Was there ever fights?
Well, I can't relate to fights. I have never seen fights at a fair myself, but it was a known thing that by the end of the day, in any fair town, there was bound to be some kind of a fight of some kind.
Was the farming a good life?
The farming, no, it wasn't a good life. It was a very necessary life. It was very important for farmers to do what they had to do in those days. It was very hard work in that they had no machinery to do it. It was all physical work. So it was a good life, a necessary life, but hard work, but one that too many farmers in those days didn't care for, I'm sure.
Hiring fairs, do you remember anybody that was hired out?
Are you talking about the hiring fairs, people who were hired to the wagon? I never was hired out myself, because there was plenty of work to be done around home. Usually it was the winter time that was done. But I know of people in Dunlewy that were hired out, yes, to fairs. And I know of an aunt of mine that was hired. She was hired for a 6-month period for £4.
Was it local or far away?
It was in Northern Ireland. I do believe it was in a place called Sign Mills.
How much did they get?
It was £4 for the 6-month period.
What kind of work did they do?
Now, that I can only relate to that one particular incident. The work, I know that the work that was normally done, you must remember that the farmers that people from the rural areas here were hired out to were hired into better farms. There were farms with much more acreage than would normally be in a farm in a rural area like this. So that farmer might have a few hundred acres. He would have much larger livestock. He would also have maybe 3 or 4 horses, and maybe sheep as well, a lot of extra sheep. So there had to be a cycle, especially during the winter time, of feeding those sheep, feeding the cattle. There was work to be done in bringing in maybe potatoes from the fields. Also in the springtime, ploughing had to be done, and the same thing that you do in a small farm.
When they were finished after being hired, did they go back to school?
In some cases they did, yes. That was true of people in Dunlewy, not in my day, but in the generation before my day. They would go back to school. They'll be hired in the earlier years, maybe as early as 11 and 12, and then they'll go back to school for the winter, for a season. I do recall that in that time there was no such thing as, not in my time now, but I'm talking the generation before me. They didn't have paper to write with. They had chalks, they had slates, and some kind of a marker to write on slate.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you asked me to be here, Anne-Marie. And I know that this is a school project. I think your teacher to be commended for putting on a project of this sort. And it's certainly in the interest and the furtherance of education for the students. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm 11 years old and I'm in 4th class and I go to Murroe School. This is Sadie Sweeney, a neighbour, and she's going to tell us about a woman's point of view. We've already heard about a man's point of view, and women had to work hard too.
Well, the women today and the women of long ago, it's all different. The women long ago had to work very hard comparing to the women of today. and they had to work hard both inside and outside because they had to do a lot of the work. The women milked the cows and they had to do all the washing, and all the washing that in them days were all done by hand. The water had to be all carried from the wells, and big pots put on the open fires, and the water had to be boiled and taken into big tubs, and spend a half day washing, all washing by hand, no machines in those days. And then when it would come to the springtime, when they had to wash the blankets, they would put on a big fire, maybe go to the river, there was a river near them where the water was, a lot of water beside them. They hadn't as much carrying to do on the water, and they had to put on a big fire, and they would boil a big pot of water there, and had baths and tubs, and they put all the blankets on there and washed them all, and had to tramp them all with their feet. They tramped all the blankets in those days, and tramped them all, and then they would take them and spread them out on the green field or around anywhere there was nice green grass, somewhere clean, and they spread the blankets out there, and they would leave them for a day or two, hoping that the weather would keep good. And that's the way they washed the clothes in them days. Same way with everything had to be carried, water all carried from the wells in buckets. And then for the housework then they had all the churning to do. They would churn maybe once a week, and they collected all the milk, and every night or every evening they would skim the milk. You know, the milk that was taken in from the cows in the morning, when the evening would come they would skim the top, would be taken off that milk, and it was put into a big crock, and it was stored there for a week, keep it for a week. And when the week was up, then that milk was thick, and it would be ready for churning. They would take out the churn then, the hand churn, or with the plunge, and they would scald the churn then and get it all done up, and put the thick milk into it then, and it was all churned then, up and down then, and that kept going for 3/4 of an hour. And they couldn't stop, because if they stopped then it would get cold. The churn would get cold, and they had to keep going up and down to keep it going. And then when they maybe 3/4 of an hour, in the summertime it wasn't too bad, but in the winter time when the milk would be, you know, when it was cold, they had to put sometimes hot water through it to get it going. So they had to keep churning then on for 3/4 of an hour, and then it would be all, the butter would all come to the top, and it would float on top of the milk then. And then they would have to get a basin and scald it with hot water and put that butter off then, and it was washed and salted and to make it keep, you know. And they might have maybe £2 or £3 of butter at a time, but that would be about it, £2 or £3 of butter. You know, and that kept them going then for the week, or maybe that butter was sold. That butter could be made then into prints. Some women would, that maybe they would, where there would be no family, maybe a few women or a woman and man on their own, they wouldn't need much butter. So that butter then was made into prints and taken to the shop and sold.
What would it be?
Well, they might get maybe 1 6 a pound for it, or maybe they would get less. I don't really know, but maybe 1 6. Butter was cheap in those days, and there wasn't many people buying butter.
Women had to be very thrifty then, Sadie, hadn't
They
they?
had to.
They had to manage the house
They
on
had to
little or
manage
no
the
money.
house on what they would just bring in, maybe from selling butter or selling eggs. It was like the same way with hens. Every household kept a lot of hens, maybe 3 dozen hens, maybe more. And then they saved all the eggs then. All the eggs were taken in every day and collected, and maybe sold about 10 dozen of eggs every week. And in the summertime they wouldn't get very much for the eggs, maybe 1 6 a dozen. But that money then was needed for to take in the tea and sugar and the flour and maybe the odd pot of jam and that. There was no biscuits or sweet cake or anything in those days. And they would bring in that, then that kept the house going all week. That was the money the women had in those days, to run the house.
On special occasions would they kill a chicken?
Well, they might kill a chicken, you know. In the springtime they would have their own chickens, you know, rear their own chickens, and they would have the odd rooster, and they would kill a rooster maybe for a Sunday dinner, or maybe at Christmas time there'll be roosters killed for the dinner, and different times like that. But the odd time, maybe if they were working or in the bog there, had men working, and when they come home they might kill the rooster for a dinner. And that rooster was put into a pot and soup. That rooster was put into the pot and put on the open fire and boiled, and soup made. Roosters were always boiled. Very rare they were roasted in those days, except at Christmas and times like that. It was always soup made. So that was that.
Women used to do all the baking themselves.
And the women did all the baking as well. Maybe where there would be a big family, there'd be as many as 3 scones a day. They would have to make 3 scones a day, and they would have their own buttermilk, which they had, when they took off the butter, they had the buttermilk then from the churn, and they used it for all the baking then,
Did you have a pot oven?
And they had the big oven pot, and the scone was baked then and put into that oven pot, and put on the crook then on the open fire, and then the lid put on it, and then they would have to have a good fire on when they were going to put on this scone. It had to be a good fire to get the coals then, and put all the coals on all the coals were put on top of the lid then to help to cook the bread, It had to be.
At night
because it
time,
would be.
what was the supper?
Well, the supper at night time was mostly porridge. Porridge, there would be a big pot of porridge put on, and open meal, and porridge was made, and everyone got a plate of porridge, and that was their supper. And there was very little tea either. Maybe you wouldn't get tea maybe 3 times a day, morning and maybe again in the evening, and there'd be no tea at bedtime. There was always porridge.
Do you have any special recipes, Sadie? Like my mother used to do something for us when we came home from school. It was bread and milk boiled together, and we used to call it pinady. I don't know where that name came from. There was another one, skilligo, eggs and onions.
Eggs and onions, that's right.
What was that?
Well, that would be hot. They would get on milk and scramble the eggs and put it in through the milk and put onions in it.
What did you call that?
There's no name much for it.
Just call it skilligo?
Maybe it was skilligo. Skilligo.
What other kind of, do you make potato bread?
They made potato bread. They did. They made potato bread as well.
What did you call that, fudge?
Fudge.
Or boxty?
Some people called it boxed. Fudge. Potato bread. I don't really know. Potato bread. But it was made anyway, with potatoes.
So the women had to do all the housework. They also had to do the knitting and.
That's right. It was the same way when the sheep were clipped. They would try and pick a bag of good fine, the wool that would come off the sheep, and get some nice fine wool, and then in the winter time they would take out the wool then, and they would start and get it all, as I say, with the cardle.
Yeah.
Cardle, which is the cardle.
Yeah.
That's an Irish word for it, cardle. And they would get them wool then and work it up and make it into nice fine wool, It was made into fine, and then it was made into what they called rollaggy.
Yeah.
With the card, cards or whatever you call it in English. It would be the Irish would be cutting the cardle, and then it was made into rollaggy. And the rollaggy would be laid out nice and on a basket, and then they would get the spinning wheel then and start then spinning, and one rollag after another then fed into the spinning wheel, and you had a ball that would come round then, and it was all made into wool, and then that wool was taken then and used for knitting socks. They knitted all their own socks for the men in those days,
Did they sell them?
and they sold them too as well. We would
pair of
knit
socks?
all winter, and a pair of socks would be sold.
How much would a pair
Maybe
of
for
socks
2
be?
and 6. Maybe for 2 and 6 a pair of socks. Maybe 2 shillings, and that they would take them to the shops, and they got rid of them all, sold them.
And would the women make red flannel vests and things?
That's the wood.
What would they use them for?
Well, they would use them for wearing in the winter time, We used,
That was the thermal underwear then.
that's right, that was their underwear then. It was right out of red.
And the black sateen. They make aprons out of the black
That's
sateen.
right, that's right. You'd make that, black aprons, they all wore black aprons. It was all made as well.
Shawls.
Shawls, that's right.
Were no coats.
There were no coats, it was all shawls the women wore in those days. It was all weaved, you know. There, like in Dunlewy there was a lot of weaving going on there. There was the
Ferries.
ferries and them, you know, there was a place in Dunlewy where it's known now as Anad Coslava. I
Aye.
think they did a lot of that weaving there.
Yeah, but people go and buy a length of cloth there.
I think so. They did a lot of weaving there, I think. And they would buy the length there.
So women just they only had the sunlight soap that time, didn't
That
they?
was the only soap, sunlight soap. There was no other soap at
Did
all.
they have washing powder?
Oh, no washing powder. They washed with the sunlight soap. No washing powder in those days. But then, not very much washing powder. All sunlight soap. That was it. Then
Women had a hard life.
they had a hard life, all different to the women of today.
Did they have to go to the bog?
And went to the bog as well and had to help out with the turf and turn them and fit them and help with the dragging of the turf. They had all that to do as well.
And rear the children.
Rear the families then and look after them the best they could. And looking after all that, so it's all work. Carry, go for their shopping, they would have to walk to the shop and bring home their, well, the shopping would only be once a week and go to the shop and get all their groceries and they would walk home and carry their bags of groceries home. There was no taxis or cars or anything in those. It all had to be done.
You're still a farmer's wife, Sadie. Still working.
I don't know about the working. The work today is not like then. The work's easy today.
Huh?
It's easy today compared to those days. It's very easy.
So,
Oh, yeah,
I think.
Thank you, Sadie, for
Thank you
helping
very
us
much.
out with the
that's a
project.
lot.
That's all you. All right, thank you.
To thank everybody who helped us in our project and farming long ago. I'd like to thank them on behalf of Murroe School. We are very grateful to them for experiencing their days with us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.